The front door clicked shut with a finality that seemed to echo through our entire house. My wife stood in the entryway, her overnight bag slipping from her shoulder to the floor with a soft thud. She'd been gone for 3 days, a weekend wedding for her college roommate upstate. I'd stayed home with our 2 kids, managing the chaos of soccer practice and homework help. "Hey, how was it?" I asked, moving toward her for a hug. She stepped back slightly, just enough to make it awkward.
"Fine. I'm exhausted."
"I think I'm going to take a shower." Something in her voice made me pause. It wasn't just tiredness, it was something else. A flatness. An absence of the usual animated storytelling that followed any social event. My wife loved weddings. She'd spent the week before talking about the venue, speculating about the food, debating which dress to pack. Now she couldn't even meet my eyes. Was the ceremony nice? I pressed, following her toward the stairs. Yeah. It was fine. Really, I just need to decompress. She disappeared into our bedroom, and I heard the bathroom door lock behind her. I stood in the hallway, holding the coffee mug I'd been drinking from, feeling an unfamiliar knot forming in my stomach. The next few days confirmed my suspicions that something had shifted. She was physically present but emotionally absent, staring at her phone with an intensity that seemed out of character. She'd always been the type to leave her phone face down during dinner, but now it was constantly in her hand, angled away from me. "Who are you texting?" I asked on Tuesday night, trying to keep my tone light. "Just Sarah, from the wedding. We're catching up." But her fingers moved to close the app too quickly, and I caught a glimpse of a name that definitely wasn't Sarah. Wednesday brought an unexpected call that interrupted our strained silence. My wife answered her phone in the kitchen, then went pale. "Yes, this is she. Today. But okay. Yes, I can come in this afternoon. Everything okay?" I asked after she hung up. "The doctor's office. They need me to come in for some test results." Her voice wavered. "They said it was important." "What test results? You didn't mention any tests." She turned away, gripping the counter. "I had some routine blood work done before the wedding. I've been feeling off lately. It's probably nothing." But I knew my wife, and this wasn't nothing. The fear in her eyes was real, mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. Guilt? Shame? "I'll come with you," I offered. "No." The word came out too sharp, too fast. She softened her tone. "I mean, you don't need to. I'm sure it's fine. Just routine follow-up." She left for the appointment at 2, and when she returned 3 hours later, she'd been crying. The papers she clutched in her hand were crumpled, and she went straight to our bedroom without a word. I gave her space for an hour, then knocked softly. "Can we talk about this?" "Not yet," came her muffled voice through the door. "Please, I just need time." That night, while she slept fitfully beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the test results were somehow connected to the wedding, to her strange behavior, to whoever she'd been texting. In the darkness, I made a decision. I would find out what was in that report. The next morning, I waited until she left for work, then searched our bedroom. The papers were tucked into her nightstand drawer, beneath a stack of old magazines. My hands trembled as I pulled them out and began to read. The medical terminology was dense, but certain words jumped out at me: sexually transmitted infection, recent exposure, immediate notification of partners required. The date of the test was 4 days before the wedding. The positive result had come in while she was away. My world tilted on its axis. Recent exposure. That meant within the past few weeks, maybe even at the wedding itself. I sat on the edge of our bed, the papers falling from my hands, trying to process the magnitude of this betrayal. Then I remembered something. A name she'd mentioned in passing while preparing for the trip. A mutual friend from college who'd also be attending with his wife. They'd been close once, before we were married. She'd laughed it off when I'd asked about him, said they'd barely kept in touch. I picked up my phone and opened her social media. It took me 15 minutes of searching through her college connections, but I found him. And there, in his recent photos from the wedding weekend, was my wife. Multiple pictures. Too close. Too familiar. His wife's profile was public. I stared at her name for a long moment, then made the call that would change everything. The woman on the other end of the line sounded surprised but not unfriendly when I introduced myself. "Oh yes, my husband mentioned you. Your wife is the one who went to school with him. Small world at that wedding." "Actually," I said, my mouth dry, "that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Do you have a few minutes?" There was a pause, and I could hear the shift in her tone. "What's this about?" "I'd rather discuss it in person, if you're willing. I think we both need to have a conversation about what might have happened that weekend." Another pause, longer this time. "My husband said it was just a fun reunion with old friends. Are you suggesting something else?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet. But I've discovered some information that I think you deserve to know about. And I'd like to understand the full picture before I make any decisions about my marriage." We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. I spent the rest of that day gathering evidence, piecing together the timeline. I checked our credit card statements and found charges I hadn't noticed before. A hotel bar, a late-night room service order she'd claimed was split among friends, purchases from a pharmacy the day before she came home. When my wife got home that evening, I kept up the pretense of normalcy, though it nearly killed me. She was still distant, still glued to her phone, but now I noticed her deleting messages, clearing her call history. The guilt was written all over her face, but she said nothing. "How are you feeling?" I asked over dinner, watching our kids push pasta around their plates, oblivious to the implosion happening around them. "After the doctor's appointment." She flinched.
Fine.
"They said I need to come back for follow-up in a few weeks. Nothing to worry about." The lie sat between us like a living thing. I wanted to confront her right there, to demand the truth, but something held me back. I needed to know everything first. I needed to understand the full scope of what she'd done. That night, after she fell asleep, I went through her phone. I knew her password, we'd always shared them, a symbol of trust that now felt bitterly ironic. The messages had been deleted, but her photo stream told a different story. Pictures from the wedding I hadn't seen before. Her and him, dancing too close. Her and him, stepping outside for fresh air. Her and him, in what looked like a hotel corridor, his hand on the small of her back. I forwarded the photos to myself and deleted the sent messages. My hands shook with rage and grief. The next morning, I met his wife at the coffee shop. She arrived looking nervous, her hands twisting a wedding ring that matched the one her husband wore in the photos. She was younger than I'd expected, probably late 20s, with kind eyes that were already filling with worry. "Thank you for coming," I said, gesturing to the seat across from me. She sat down slowly. "Your call scared me. What's this about?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. Her face went white as she swiped through them, her breathing becoming shallow. When was this?" "Last weekend. At the wedding." He told me he barely saw her, that she was busy with other friends. Her voice broke. He's been acting strange since he got back. Distant. Secretive with his phone. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Did they?" "I don't know for certain what happened between them," I said carefully. "But my wife came home with a sexually transmitted infection. The exposure timeline matches the wedding weekend." She made a sound like a wounded animal, covering her mouth with her hand. Other patrons glanced our way, but I didn't care. Let them stare. "I'm so sorry," I continued. "But there's more you need to know. And I think we need to confront them together. Both of them, at the same time." She wiped her eyes, and I saw anger replacing the shock. "What do you have in mind?" I explained my plan. It was bold, maybe even cruel, but I needed the truth. We both did. And I needed them to face the consequences of their actions together, to see the damage they'd caused to both families. "My wife doesn't know I'm aware of the medical diagnosis," I told her. "The report is still in our house. If you're willing, I want you to be the one to read it aloud. In front of both of them." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "When?" Tomorrow night. I'll tell my wife I've invited friends for dinner. Can you bring your husband? Tell him it's a chance to catch up with old friends. Keep things casual. He'll come, she said bitterly. He's been talking about how great it was to reconnect with everyone. How your wife was always such a good friend. We spent the next hour coordinating the details, exchanging phone numbers, planning exactly how the evening would unfold. As we parted ways, she grabbed my arm. Thank you, she said, for not letting me stay in the dark. Whatever happens tomorrow, at least we'll know the truth. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I sent my kids to my parents' house, telling them we were having adult friends over for dinner. My mother asked if everything was okay. Mothers always know, but I brushed off her concerns with a forced smile. My wife seemed suspicious when I told her about the dinner plans. You invited who? Remember your friend from the wedding? And his wife. They're in town, and I thought it would be nice to get together. You've been talking about what a great time you had reconnecting. I watched her face carefully. The color drained from her cheeks, then rushed back in a guilty flush. Oh, I didn't know you'd been in touch with them. His wife reached out on social media. Seemed really eager to meet up. I kept my voice casual, though my heart was pounding. I figured since you all had such a good time at the wedding, why not? She fumbled with her phone, clearly trying to warn him, but I'd already thought of that. His wife had his phone. She'd taken it that morning, claiming hers was broken and she needed to make calls. He was in the dark, just as my wife was about to be. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. I cooked my wife's favorite meal, set the table with our good dishes, even lit candles. The domesticity of it all felt surreal, like I was preparing for a funeral rather than a dinner party. At 6:30, the doorbell rang. My wife jumped like she'd been electrocuted. I opened the door to find them standing there, him with a bottle of wine and a confused smile, her with eyes like steel.
Come in.
I said, playing the gracious host. So glad you could make it. He stepped inside, and I watched my wife's face transform through a dozen emotions in seconds. Shock, fear, calculation. She recovered quickly, pasting on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. What a surprise, she said, her voice too high. I didn't realize you two were in town. Last-minute trip, his wife said smoothly, her hand tight on her husband's arm. We thought it would be nice to see you both again so soon. The tension in the room was palpable. He kept glancing between my wife and me, clearly sensing something was wrong. My wife excused herself to the bathroom, and I heard her frantic whispers on the phone, but there was no escape now. We made it through appetizers with strained small talk. He tried to be jovial, asking about my work, complimenting the house. His wife barely spoke, just sipped her wine and watched him with an expression that would have frozen fire. During dinner, I steered the conversation to the wedding. Sounds like you all had quite the reunion. My wife's been different since she got back. Glowing, really. My wife kicked me under the table. He shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, it was great to catch up with old friends. Those college connections, you know, they never really fade. Apparently not, his wife said coldly. The pretense was crumbling. My wife pushed food around her plate, barely eating. He'd gone pale, finally picking up on the undercurrent of hostility. After dinner, I stood up. Why don't we move to the living room? I have something I want to share with everyone. My wife grabbed my wrist. What are you doing? I pulled away gently but firmly. Getting answers. Come on. We assembled in the living room, my wife and her lover on opposite ends of the couch, maintaining a careful distance that was itself an admission of guilt. His wife sat in the armchair, her purse clutched on her lap. I remained standing. I want to thank you all for coming, I began. This hasn't been an easy week. My wife came home from the wedding acting strange, distant, secretive, and then she got some medical news that raised a lot of questions. Stop, my wife whispered. Please stop. Questions like, how does a married woman in a supposedly monogamous relationship contract a sexually transmitted infection? The room erupted. He lunged to his feet. "What are you talking about?" His wife opened her purse and pulled out the papers I'd given her earlier. "Sit down," she commanded, and something in her voice made him obey. My wife was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "It's not what you think. I can explain." "Then explain," I said. "Explain to all of us." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just sobs. I nodded to his wife. "Would you mind reading the medical report? Out loud, so we all understand what we're dealing with." She stood up, unfolding the papers with steady hands despite her obvious emotional turmoil. Her voice was clear and cold as she began to read. "Patient presented with symptoms consistent with recent infection," she read, her voice cutting through my wife's sobs like a knife. "Laboratory results confirm positive diagnosis for chlamydia. Patient reported sexual contact within the previous 7 days. Contact tracing required for all recent partners." "Stop," my wife pleaded, but his wife continued, relentless. "Test was administered on Thursday, April 15th. Results received Monday, April 19th. Patient expressed shock at diagnosis and initially denied possibility of exposure outside of marriage." She looked up from the papers, her eyes blazing. "The wedding was April 16th through 18th. Would you like me to continue?" He had gone grey, his hands gripping his knees. "This is insane. I'm not." "You're not what?" his wife interrupted. "Not sick. Because I made you get tested yesterday, and the clinic called this morning. Positive. Same infection." She turned to him, and I saw 15 different kinds of pain in her eyes. "So either you caught it from someone else and gave it to her, or she caught it from someone else and gave it to you. Either way, you were together." The silence that followed was deafening. My wife had curled into herself on the couch, rocking slightly. He sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "I think we deserve the truth," I said quietly. "All of it. What happened that weekend?" "Nothing happened," my wife managed through her tears. "I swear, nothing." "Don't lie to me," I roared, my composure finally breaking. "Don't you dare lie to me anymore. The medical evidence doesn't lie. The timeline doesn't lie. Your behavior doesn't lie. So stop lying and tell me what you did." She flinched, and some small part of me felt guilty for yelling, but it was drowned out by the tsunami of betrayal and rage coursing through me. "We just talked," she whispered. "At the reception. We danced. We caught up. He was telling me about his life, and I was telling him about mine, and it felt like college again. Easy. Comfortable." "And then," his wife prompted, her voice deadly calm. My wife looked at him, and something passed between them, a shared memory, a shared shame. He dropped his head into his hands. "The reception went late," he said, his voice muffled. "Most people had left. We were both pretty drunk. We went outside to the garden, just to talk more privately. We kissed," my wife admitted. "Just once. And I stopped it immediately. I told him it was a mistake, that we were both married, that it couldn't happen." "But it did happen," his wife said. "Because you didn't stop there, did you?" The silence stretched. I felt like I was watching my marriage disintegrate in real time, each second of quiet another nail in the coffin. Finally, he spoke. "We ran into each other the next morning. At the hotel breakfast. Everyone else was sleeping in or had already checked out. We started talking again, and I suggested we take a walk. There were trails around the property. And during this walk?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My wife buried her face in her hands. "We found a quiet spot. Away from the hotel. Away from everyone. And we talked about what it would have been like if we'd ended up together. If we'd made different choices after college." "Jesus Christ," his wife breathed. "You're seriously trying to make this sound romantic." "It wasn't romantic," my wife shot back, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "It was stupid and selfish and wrong. But we were caught up in nostalgia and alcohol and And you fucked him, I finished flatly. In the woods like teenagers while your husband was home taking care of your children. She flinched at my language but didn't deny it. It only happened once. Immediately after, I knew it was the worst mistake of my life. I came home planning to pretend it never happened, to be a better wife, to forget it ever occurred. And then you got sick, his wife said bitterly. Calm as a bitch, isn't it? He finally looked up, and I saw tears on his face too. I'm so sorry. To both of you. To everyone. It was unforgivable. You're right, his wife said, standing up abruptly. It was unforgivable. Which is why I'm leaving. Not just this house, I'm leaving you. I already packed your things. They're in the garage at our house. You can pick them up tomorrow, but you're not coming inside. Wait, please, he started, reaching for her. She stepped back like his touch was poison. Don't touch me. Don't call me. Don't try to fix this. You threw away 5 years of marriage for what? A nostalgia fuck with your college friend? Someone you hadn't seen in years. Her voice broke. I gave you everything. I loved you completely. And you did this. She turned to me. Thank you for telling me. For not letting me live in ignorance. Whatever you decide to do, I hope you find peace. She walked out, leaving him sitting there, broken and alone. He looked at my wife one last time, then got up and followed his now ex-wife out the door without another word. My wife and I sat in the wreckage of our living room, the candles still burning, the dinner dishes still on the table, our marriage in pieces around us. Say something, she whispered finally. I looked at her, this woman I'd loved for 10 years, the mother of my children, my partner in everything. And I felt nothing but emptiness. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of this house. Tonight. Go stay with your sister. Go to a hotel, I don't care. But I can't look at you right now. Please, we need to talk about this. Talk about what? I stood up, my voice rising. Talk about how you betrayed me. How you risked my health for a moment of nostalgia. How you looked me in the eye every day this week and lied. The sound of my wife's suitcase rolling across our hardwood floor at 2 in the morning was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. She'd spent the past 3 hours alternating between apologizing, explaining, and begging me to reconsider. I'd spent them sitting in silence, trying to process the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my life. I'll call you tomorrow, she said from the doorway, her voice small and broken. Maybe we can talk when you've had time to. Don't, I interrupted. Don't call. Don't text. If I want to talk, I'll reach out through a lawyer. The word hung in the air between us. Lawyer. The reality of divorce made tangible. She left, and I sat in the darkness of our living room until the sun came up, watching the shadows shift and change, much like everything else in my life. The next few days were a blur of difficult conversations. I told my parents first, watching my mother cry for the grandchildren who would grow up in a broken home. I told my kids in age-appropriate terms, Mommy and Daddy needed time apart, it wasn't their fault, they were loved completely. My daughter, 7 years old, asked if it was because of something she'd done. My son, 5, just cried and asked when Mommy was coming home. I didn't have good answers for them. My wife had moved in with her sister across town. She'd called repeatedly, sent long emails full of remorse and promises to do better. I'd responded only once, through text, my lawyer will contact you. On Friday, 6 days after the dinner party that had detonated our lives, I got a call from his wife. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. I wanted to check in, she said. See how you were holding up. About as well as can be expected, I said. You? Same. I've filed for divorce. My lawyer says it should be straightforward since we don't have kids or significant shared assets. She paused. I keep wondering if I should have seen the signs. If I was stupid for missing them. You weren't stupid. We trusted them. That's not stupidity, that's love. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Love. Yeah. I'm not sure I'll ever trust that word again. We talked for an hour, two people bonded by betrayal, comparing notes on the wreckage. She told me he'd been sending her flowers, leaving voicemails begging for another chance. I told her about my wife's emails, her insistence that it had meant nothing, that our marriage was worth fighting for. "Do you believe her?" she asked. "That it meant nothing?" I thought about that. I don't know. Maybe the sex itself meant nothing. But the choice to do it? The choice to risk everything? That meant something. It meant our marriage wasn't sacred to her. That in a moment of temptation, I wasn't enough. "Yeah," she said softly. "That's what keeps me up at night. The idea that I was never enough." "That's on them," I said firmly. "Not us. We were faithful. We were honest. We did everything right. They're the ones who failed." After we hung up, I sat with that truth. My wife had failed me, failed our vows, failed our family. But I hadn't failed. I'd been a good husband, a present father, a faithful partner. The destruction of my marriage wasn't my burden to carry. That realization felt like light breaking through clouds. 2 weeks later, I met with my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. My wife had agreed to everything: joint custody, equitable distribution of assets, even moving out of the house so the kids could stay in their home. Her guilt made her generous. The day the papers were signed, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Yes, my marriage had ended in betrayal. Yes, my kids would grow up shuttling between houses. Yes, I'd have to rebuild my entire life. But I was free from the lies. Free from the uncertainty. Free from a relationship that had been violated beyond repair. I ran into them once, 3 months later, at a grocery store. My wife looked thin and tired, pushing a cart with half-hearted selections. He was with her, helping her reach something on a high shelf. They'd apparently found their way back to each other in the wreckage. She saw me and froze. He had the decency to look ashamed. I simply nodded and walked past them, my head high. That night, I told my kids that Mommy had a new friend, and it was okay if they saw him sometimes at her house. My daughter asked if that meant I'd have a new friend too. I told her maybe someday, when I was ready. His ex-wife, I still thought of her that way, had moved to another state, taking a job that was a significant promotion. We'd stayed in touch, occasional texts checking in, comparing notes on healing. She'd started therapy and encouraged me to do the same. I'd taken her advice. My therapist asked me once if I regretted the dinner party, the public confrontation, the dramatic reveal. I thought about it carefully before answering. "No," I said finally. They'd built their affair on secrets and lies. Exposing it in front of each other meant they couldn't spin separate stories, couldn't manipulate the narrative. They had to face what they'd done together, just like they'd done the act together. There's a justice in that. 6 months after that terrible dinner, I was putting my kids to bed when my daughter asked, "Daddy, are you sad about Mommy?" I considered the question. Was I sad? Yes, in ways. Sad for what we'd lost, sad for the family we'd never be again. But I wasn't devastated anymore. I wasn't drowning. "Sometimes," I told her honestly. "But I'm also okay. And that's the important part. Daddy's going to be okay, and you're going to be okay, and we're going to be happy. Different than before, but still happy." She nodded, satisfied with this answer, and curled up with her stuffed rabbit. As I turned out the light, I realized it was true. I was going to be okay. The betrayal had been shattering, but I'd survived it. I'd demanded truth and accountability. I'd protected my dignity and my health. I'd shown my children that actions have consequences, and that self-respect matters more than preserving a comfortable lie. The dinner party had been an ending, yes, the end of my marriage, the end of my innocence about who my wife really was. But it had also been a beginning. The beginning of a life built on truth instead of lies. The beginning of healing. The beginning of whatever came next. And as I sat in my quiet house, my children sleeping safely down the hall, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Not for reconciliation or for going back to what was, but hope for moving forward into something new. Something honest. Something real. The medical report that had revealed the betrayal was filed away in a drawer now, evidence I no longer needed to examine. The truth was out. The consequences had been faced.